Have you ever wondered why the end of a marriage after 40 can feel less like a chapter closing and more like your nervous system is on fire? Divorce at this stage of life is not merely a legal separation or a shift in social status. It is a neurobiological shock that reverberates through the brain's attachment circuitry, stress response systems, and reward pathways. For decades, your brain has calibrated itself around one primary bond: shared routines, physical closeness, conflict, and repair. Cycles, even silent evenings on the couch, have shaped neural networks responsible for emotional regulation and perceived safety. When that bond dissolves, the brain does not interpret it as paperwork filed in a courthouse, it registers it as loss, threat, and destabilization. Cortisol surges as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activates, sleep architecture fragments, and dopamine tone drops in circuits that once lit up in response to familiar affection. What you feel as emptiness is often a measurable decline in reward signaling. What you experience as restlessness is frequently the nervous system searching for equilibrium. In midlife, this disruption is intensified because identity has become deeply intertwined with partnership roles. Spouse, provider, co-parent, companion. These roles are not superficial labels, they are reinforced by years of repetition that sculpt synaptic connections. When the marriage ends, the brain must renegotiate who you are without the relational mirror that reflected you back to yourself. That identity disruption compounds stress reactivity, making even ordinary challenges feel amplified. Loneliness is not just emotional, it is physiological. Human attachment regulates heart rate variability, modulates immune response, and stabilizes mood. The sudden absence of that regulatory presence can produce a sense of internal chaos. In this vulnerable state, substances can appear not as reckless choices but as tools promising relief. Alcohol softens, hyperarousal, sedatives quiet racing thoughts, stimulants momentarily restore depleted dopamine. Each offers a shortcut to neurochemical balance, but the relief is temporary and often followed by deeper dysregulation. The brain, seeking homeostasis, begins to associate these substances with safety and comfort, subtly reinforcing patterns that can escalate into misuse. Research consistently shows that major relational loss correlates with increased relapse risk, particularly in individuals with prior substance use histories. The combination of financial stress, disrupted social networks, and the existential questioning that often accompanies midlife transition creates a perfect storm for maladaptive coping. Yet it is critical to understand that this vulnerability is not evidence of weakness or moral failure. It is a predictable stress response rooted in biology. The attachment system evolved to keep us bonded because connection enhanced survival. When connection is severed, the alarm sounds loudly. Recognizing this reality reframes the experience. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" a more accurate question becomes, "What is my brain trying to regulate?" That shift in perspective is empowering. It transforms shame into curiosity and opens the door to intentional healing strategies grounded in neuroscience rather than self-criticism. In the months following a midlife divorce, something subtle yet powerful begins to unfold beneath conscious awareness, and it is here that the real danger often hides. The acute shock may pass, paperwork may be finalized, friends may reassure you that time heals, but the brain's reward system does not recalibrate overnight. Dopamine pathways that were once synchronized with shared experiences now fire less predictably, and the absence of anticipated connection creates a persistent sense of deficit. This deficit is not merely emotional longing, it is a measurable drop in motivational drive. Activities that once felt meaningful can seem flat. Food tastes duller, music moves you less. Even accomplishments feel strangely hollow. The brain, designed to seek equilibrium, begins scanning the environment for faster, stronger stimuli capable of restoring intensity. This is the moment when high dopamine behaviors become disproportionately attractive. A drink at the end of the day becomes two. A prescription meant for short-term sleep relief becomes a nightly ritual. Online distractions stretch late into the night, escalating from harmless scrolling to compulsive engagement. What makes this phase particularly insidious is that it often masquerades as coping. You tell yourself you deserve comfort. You rationalize that this is temporary. You assume you are simply adjusting. Yet beneath these narratives, neuroadaptation is quietly occurring. Repeated exposure to artificial dopamine surges teaches the brain that relief comes externally, not internally. Over time, baseline dopamine production can further decrease, intensifying cravings and reinforcing dependency loops. This is the suspenseful turning point that many people do not recognize until consequences surface. Sleep becomes increasingly fragmented despite using substances intended to induce rest. Anxiety spikes between episodes of consumption. Irritability rises. The very behaviors chosen to numb pain begin amplifying it. In the philosophy of clinicians like Dr. Anna Lempsey, addiction is often described as the progressive narrowing of what brings pleasure and meaning until the substance or behavior occupies center stage. After divorce, when identity and attachment are already destabilized, that narrowing can accelerate. The brain's balance between pleasure and pain tilts. Each artificial high is followed by a proportional low, and the lows grow heavier. What once felt like relief now feels like necessity. This is how vulnerability evolves into risk. It is not dramatic at first. It is incremental, layered, and disguised as self-soothing. The stress response system remains activated longer than expected, especially in midlife when resilience may already be taxed by career pressures, aging parents, or shifting health. Chronic cortisol elevation impairs prefrontal cortex function, reducing impulse control and long-term planning. Decision-making becomes more reactive. Emotional triggers carry greater weight. In this neurobiological landscape, relapse rates climb because the architecture supporting restraint is under strain. The most unsettling truth is that many individuals experiencing this pattern are high-functioning, responsible, and outwardly composed. From the outside, nothing appears alarming. Internally, however, the reward system is recalibrating around short-term relief. The suspense lies in the gap between perception and physiology. You may believe you are managing, while your brain is quietly learning a different lesson about where safety and satisfaction reside. The path forward begins the moment you understand that what you are experiencing is not a character flaw but a neurobiological recalibration that requires intentional care. When the attachment system is destabilized and dopamine tone is suppressed, the solution is not self-condemnation, it is structured restoration. Healing after divorce and midlife demands that you deliberately rebuild the regulatory mechanisms that were once supported by partnership. This means prioritizing sleep hygiene to stabilize circadian rhythms, because consistent sleep restores prefrontal cortex function and improves impulse control. It means engaging in regular physical activity, not as a cosmetic pursuit but as a neurochemical intervention that increases baseline dopamine and serotonin while reducing cortisol. It means cultivating social microconnections, even when isolation feels safer, because human contact stimulates oxytocin release and gradually reestablishes a sense of security. The brain changes in response to repeated experience, and this principle becomes your leverage. Small, disciplined behaviors repeated daily can shift neurobiology in a healthier direction. Evidence-based therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma-informed approaches help reinterpret intrusive thoughts and reduce amygdala hyperreactivity. Mindfulness practices strengthen the anterior cingulate cortex, enhancing emotional regulation and decreasing compulsive urges. Structured routines reduce decision fatigue, preserving mental bandwidth for long-term goals rather than short-term relief. Perhaps most importantly, transparency interrupts secrecy. Sharing struggles with trusted friends, support groups, or licensed professionals reduces shame and activates neural circuits associated with belonging. When you name the craving instead of hiding it, you weaken its power. Recovery-oriented communities demonstrate that vulnerability can coexist with strength and that accountability can be compassionate rather than punitive. Over time, the brain begins to recalibrate its reward expectations. Natural pleasures regain intensity. Achievement feels meaningful again. Emotional waves become tolerable without chemical anesthesia. This process is gradual, and patience is essential, because neuroadaptation unfolds over weeks and months, not days. You may encounter setbacks, but setbacks are data, not destiny. Each lapse provides information about triggers, stressors, and unmet needs. When interpreted constructively, even mistakes become part of the rewiring process. Midlife divorce, though profoundly destabilizing, can also catalyze growth. The disruption forces a reevaluation of values, boundaries, and purpose. You have the opportunity to redefine identity not around loss, but around conscious design, Resilience is not the absence of pain, it is the capacity to metabolize pain without outsourcing relief to substances that ultimately intensify suffering. By understanding the biological underpinnings of craving, you transform confusion into clarity. By implementing structured coping strategies, you convert vulnerability into strength. And by recognizing that your brain is plastic and responsive to intentional input, you reclaim agency over your trajectory. The end of a marriage does not have to mark the beginning of decline. It can mark the beginning of disciplined renewal, where emotional awareness replaces avoidance and long-term fulfillment replaces fleeting escape. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notifications so you can see our new videos early.